scholars and learners, those who are listening from the field of English literature. If you are preparing for your examination, you must go through the literary words that are being performed by the blessings and grace of God, who is everlasting, ever soothing, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, all human soul. In English literature, we study different type of ages and phases that determined English words economically, politically, socially, publicly, professionally, personally, every way. The literature is influenced by the present political situation. As in modern literature, we study that our modern literature is totally influenced by the prominent events of the present age. As it happened First World War in 1914 to 18 and 1938 to 45. These were the greatest events in English literature that influenced the writings of the novelists, dramatists, poets. So likely that Victorian age was influenced by Queen Victoria. When Queen Victoria came at the throne in 1837, it was the time of compromise between science and religion. Science was at its climax, and the teachings of the Bible also were at its climax. As per the teachings of the Bible, as per the teachings of the Holy Bible, it was believed that the earth revolves around the sun and it rotates east to west. It is round shaped. But science, in the presence of Galileo and Copernicus, through the Germany and Italy, it was proved that Earth also revolves west to east and it is egg shaped. So it created upheaval and the great jolt for the believers of the church. So it created contradictions, conflicts between science and religion. Ultimately, both they compromised and they thought that it is better to compromise. What is written in English literature about it? What is science fiction? mention some famous science fiction of 20th century. Science fiction is a genre of fiction in which the stories often tell about science and technology of the future. Science fiction texts are often set in the future, in space, on a different world, or in a different universe or dimension. Some well-known 20th century science fiction texts include 1984 by George Orwell, Brave New Worlds by Aldous Huxley, and The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand. What is a short story? Which are necessary elements of a story? A short story is a short narrative of incidents in their sequence. A short story may also be called a storiette or storytale. A story has 5 basic but important elements. These 5 components are the character, the setting, the pilot, the plot, the conflict, and the resolution. Are science fictions completely fictitious? In answer of this question, it is important to note that science fiction has a relationship with the principles of science. These stories involve partially true, partially fictitious laws or theories of science. What is function of stream of consciousness technique? In literature, stream of consciousness is a method of narration that describes in words the flow of thoughts in the minds of the characters. It is a style of writing developed by a group of writers at the beginning of the 20th century. It aimed at expressing in words the flow of a character's thoughts and feelings in their minds. The technique aspires to give readers the impression of being inside the mind of the character. Therefore, the internal view of the minds of the characters sheds light on plot and motivation in the novel. Write a note on humor in Victorian novels. The creative imagination is also seen in the humor of the Victorian novelists. Each of the great Victorian novelists is a humorist, and each is a humorist in style of his own. They have created a number of immortal figures of fun, each comic in his own different way. There are hundreds of fine jokes and witty remarks spread all over the Victorian novel. Mr. Micawber and Mrs. Pazer are immortal figure of fun. Write a brief note on the pessimistic temper prevalent during the Victorian age. The note of pessimism in Victorian era. It is for the first time in the reign of Queen Victoria that conscious pessimism becomes a force in English letters. In the beginning of the era, there is widespread faith in continuous advancement of human society, especially of the English. That but soon, the course of events shatters this faith, and the consequent despair and frustration is equally great. The pendulum swings to the other extreme. Victorian pessimism is the outcome of a number of factors. It was an era of rapid social change, causing profound spiritual disturbance, to which the sensitive poets of the age were particularly prone. The age experienced irrationalism and the retreating forces of Christianity and religion. Faith in religion was shaken, and so was also shaken the faith in nature as a kindly, benevolent mother. While science destroyed much of the traditional faith, it could not provide another spiritual anchor. There was a breakdown of values and ideals, and man felt orphaned and defrauded. Many thinkers and poets then felt lost, without moorings or rudder. They found themselves caught between two worlds, one dead, the other powerless to be born. Some attempted a sort of compromise between science and religion and failed. Others were knocked about by doubt and despair, and the ensuing melancholy settled down into pessimism and despair about the future of mankind. Some, like Thomas Hardy and Huxley, went over to open agnosticism, indifferent to religions, and started singing poems of the powers of science. Some, like Macaulay, dazzled by the material splendor and prosperity ushered in by remarkable developments in technology, gravitated towards a posture of snug Victorian complacency. Robert Browning kept above doubt and despair, and complacently believed God in his heaven. All is right with the world. He tried to see good even in things evil, but such optimism is essentially alien to the Victorian spirit, and it is not surprising that he was dubbed a blind optimist by a number of his contemporaries and by a still larger number of his successors. What is science fiction? What is described in it? Science fiction is a genre of fiction in which the stories often tell about science and technology of the future. it is important to note that science fiction has a relationship with the principles of science. These stories involve partially true, partially fictitious laws or theories of science. It should not be completely unbelievable because it then ventures into the genre fantasy. The plot creates situations different from those of both the present day and the known past. Science fiction texts also include a human element, explaining what effect new discoveries, happenings, and scientific developments will have on us in the future. Science fiction texts are often set in the future, in space, on a different world, or in a different universe or dimension. Early pioneers of genre of science fiction are H.G. Wells, The War of the Worlds, and Jules Verne, 20,000 League Under the Sea. Some well-known 20th century science fiction texts include 1984 by George Orwell, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. In addition, the four most popular and well-recognized 20th century authors are Isaac Asimov, author of the Fountain trilogy and his Robot series, Arthur C. Clarke, famous for 2001, A Space Odyssey, Ray Bradbury, known for his Martian Chronicles, and Robert Heinlein, author of Stranger in a Strange Land and The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. What are the chief characteristics of a short story? A short story has 5 basic but important elements. These 5 components are the characters, the setting, the plot, the conflict, and the resolution. Characters. The characters are the individuals that the story is about. The author should introduce the characters in the story with enough information that the reader can visualize each person. This is achieved by providing detailed descriptions of a character's physical attributes and personality traits. Every story should have main character. The main character determines the way the plot will develop and is usually who will solve the problem the story centers upon. However, the other characters are also very important because they apply additional details, explanation, or actions. Settings. The setting is the location of the action. An author should describe the environment or surroundings of the story in such detail that the reader feels that he or she can picture the scene. Plot. The plot is the actual story around which the entire book is based. A plot should have a very clear beginning, middle and end. Those are necessary descriptions and suspense called exposition. Conflict. Every story has a conflict to solve. The plot is centered on this conflict and the ways in which the characters attempt to resolve the problem. Resolution. The solution to the problem is the way it is resolved. It is important that the resolution fit the rest of the story in tone and creativity and solve all the parts of the conflict. Comment on Mrs. Virginia Woolf's contribution as a novelist of stream of consciousness. Mrs. Woolf belongs to the school of stream of consciousness novelists. She is one of those great English novelists of the 20th century who had the courage to break free from traditions and then to give a new direction, a new form and a new spiritual awareness to the English novel. She began writing in the established tradition on the novel. Her first two novels, The Voyage Out and Night and Day, are largely traditional, but soon she realized the inadequacy of the traditional novel and adopted the stream of consciousness technique in the traditional novel and adopted the stream of consciousness novel technique in the Jacob's Room, her third novel. Her art rapidly matured and her next two novels, Mrs. Dalloway and To the Lighthouse, represent the very consummation of the novel of the subjectivity. Write a short note on the stream of consciousness novel. The type of physiological novel which takes as the subject matter the uninterrupted, uneven and endless flow of consciousness of one or more of its characters came to be called as stream of consciousness novel. The stream of consciousness novel uses varied techniques to represent this consciousness adequately. In general, most physiological novels report the flow of consciousness and ordered intelligence, as in Henry James, or the flow of memory recalled by association, as in Marcel Proust. But the stream of consciousness novel tends to concentrate its attention chiefly on the pre-speech, non-verbalized novel level, where the image must express the unarticulated response and where the logic of grammar belongs to another word. Write an essay on the literary background of Victorian era and literary trends prevalent in the Victorian novel. When we speak of the Victorian novel, we do not mean that there was a conscious school of the English novel with a consciously common style and subject matter, a school which began creating with the reign of Queen Victoria and which came to an end with the end of the reign. The English are too individualistic for such conformity. However, there can be no denying the fact that the English novel during second half of the 19th century, with the exception of one or two novelists, showed certain common characteristics. We have now to study those common characteristics adherence to the Fielding tradition, loose plots. For one thing, the Victorian novel continues to be largely in the Fielding tradition. The plot is generally loose and ill constructed. The main outline of the Victorian novel is the same. The story consists of a large variety of character and incident clustering round the figure of the hero. These characters and incidents are connected together rather than loosely by an intrigue ending with the ringing of wedding bells. Thackeray follows on the whole this convention. A mixture of strength and weakness. Secondly, the Victorian novel is an extraordinary mixture of strength and weakness. There is too much of this false sentiment. Flashy melodramas and life-less characters. There is much that is impossible and artificial character and incident. Speaking generally, the Victorians failed to construct an organic plot, a plot in which every incident and character forms an integral part of the whole. Thackeray's plots, though much better characters than those of Dickens, are still loose and theatrical. There is much superfluity even in Vanity Fair, and much that is unconvincing and artificial. Entertainment value. Still, the Victorian makes interesting reading. The novelists may not construct a compact plot, but they tell the story so well. They are so entertaining that children still love to read and enjoy a novel of Dickens or Thackeray. The plot may be improbable, but there is enough suspense and the reader's attention is not allowed to slack even for a single moment. They do not like to give it up unfinished. Panoramic nature. The Victorian novelists may miss the heights and depths of human passion. There may be no probing of the human heart, and so psychoanalysis. We do get such probing in George Eliot as in the modern novel, but they cast their nets very wide. Novels like Vanity Fair, David Copperfield, etc. are not, like most modern novels concentrated wholly on the life and fountains and fortunes of a few principal characters. They also provide panoramas of whole societies. In the Victorian novel, 100 different types and classes, persons and nationalities jostle each other across the shadow nation. Immense variety. The Victorian novelist is a man of varied moods. His range of mood is as wide as his range of subject. Just as he deals with all aspects of society, so also he renders human moods in all their manifold variety. He is not a specialist in any one mood or temper. The novelist of the age cannot be categorized, as David Cecil puts it. They write equally for the train journey and for old time. They crowd realism and fantasy, thrills and theories, knockout farce and effects of pure aesthetic beauty. Checked by Joel on the same page, they are Mr. Galsworthy and Mr. Huxley and Mr. Wolfe, Mrs. Christie, Mrs. Christie and Mr. Woodhouse all in one. A book like David Copperfield is a sort of vast schoolboy hamper of fiction with sweets and sandwiches, pots of jam with their greased paper caps, cream and nuts, juicy apples, all packed together in a heterogeneous deliciousness. Creative imagination. Not only have the Victorian novelists width and range of subject and mood, not only are they entertaining storytellers, they have also creative imagination in simple measure. Their imagination works on their personal experiences and transforms and transmutes them. Their renderings of the real world are not photographs but pictures colored by their individual idiosyncrasies, vivid and vital. Often the picture is fanciful and romantic. At other times, it sticks close to the facts of actual existence, but these facts are always fired and colored by the writer's individuality. The act of creation is always performed. Dickens is the romancer of London streets, and Thackeray too transports us to an entirely new world. Call it Vanity Fair or Thackeray Land or what you will. The creative imagination of the Victorian novelists work on the setting of his story and transforms it. This creative imagination is also seen at work on the incidents or the stories of the Victorian writer. They linger long in the memory because they have been made dramatic and picturesque by the imagination of the novelist. They abound in dramatic and picturesque scenes, as in Vanity Fair, as a picture is an invention of line and color. So are these brilliant inventions of sense and action. Characterization. The most important expression of this creative imagination is to be seen in the most important part of the novel, that is in the characterization. The Victorians are all able to make their characters live. Their characters may not always be real. There may be much in them that is improbable and false, but they are amazingly and indomitably alive. They are wonderfully energetic and vital. They are all individuals, living their own existence and lingering long in the memory once we have formed an acquaintance with them. They act in their own characteristic way. They have their own tricks of speech, their own way of saying and doing things. A Victorian novel is a crowd of breathing, crying, living, laughing people. It has a crowded canvas, crowded with living, breathing individuals. Technical weakness or lack of high artistic standards. The Victorian novel lacks uniformity. It is extremely unequal. It is an extraordinary mixture of strength and weakness. It is technically faulty. This is so because it is still in its infancy. It is still considered as a light entertainment and not a serious work of art, and the laws of its being have not yet evolved. In this connection, David Cecil observes, because it was in its first stage, it was bound to be technically faulty. It had not yet evolved its own laws. It was still bound to the convention of the comic stage and heroic romance from which it took its origin. With their artificial intrigues and stock situations and forced happy endings, because it was looked on as light reading. Its readers did not expect a high standard of craft, and did they mind it if it had occasional lapses, especially as they themselves had no tradition of taste by which to estimate, especially as they themselves had no tradition of taste by which to estimate it. On the other hand, they strongly objected to spending their hours of light reading on themes but were distressing or put intellectual strain on them. One sided view of life. What is the one sided view of life? Then again, the Victorian prudery comes in the way of a free and frank treatment of the animal side of life. In this respect, the Victorian novel shows a definite decline from the earlier English novel. Any lapse from virtue is shrouded in an atmosphere of drawing the blinds and lowering the voice. Free and uninhibited treatment of the animal side is lacking. The Victorian novel gives only a partial, one-sided view of life. Its real greatness. For these reasons, the Victorian novelist cannot be ranked with the very great, yet they have greatness in them. They have their imperfections. Their plots are improbable and melodramatic. Their endings are conventional and other construction in loose. They do not have any high artistic standards, but their merits also are many. They are very entertaining. They can capture and hold the attention. They have creative imagination, and they have the incomparable gift of humor, and these are the qualities which only the great have. Its two phases. The novel in the Victorian era is so abundant and prolific that it is usual to divide the Victorian novelist like into early Victorian novelist and the later Victorian novelist. Buying and selling are perfectly straightforward and matter between dealer and customer. The dealer asks as he thinks he can extort, and the customer having paid it is under no obligation whatever to the dealer. These lines have been taken from the concluding paragraph of the essay, Third Thoughts by E.V. Lucas. The happy purchaser of a masterpiece painting by Turner wanted to share his profit equally with the dealer from whom the painting had been bought originally at a very cheap price. It had been bought at 10 shillings and sold at 50 pounds. But with every reconsideration of the matter, he had reduced paying half the amount. The 10 pounds, then 5 pounds, and then 1 pound. At last he decides not to give him anything at all. In these lines, the hero of the story points out that the deal he had with the desire of paintings was purely commercial deal, as usual between a seller and a buyer of goods. In business, emotions do not and should not play any part. From the point of view of commercial dealing, the author is all right in his final judgment that the buyer is under no obligation to share his profit. Lucas here deals with a minor mental struggle in a manner as if it were a grand spiritual struggle. Of course, great principles are involved, and the mental struggle described represents the economic selfishness of our modern society. However, the hero of this story, debating whether to pay or not, is no Hamlet. The almost epic grandeur and glamour thrown over a petty commercial deal recalls Lamb's genius in transforming the commonplace. Behind this story is a gentle satire on our money-making civilization. After all, so my thoughts ran as I destroyed the envelope and contents. Such bargains are all part of the game. Buying and selling are a perfectly straightforward matter between dealer and the customer. The dealer asks as much as he thinks can extort, and the customer, having paid it, is under no obligation whatever to the dealer. The incident is closed. These are the concluding lines of the essay, Third Thoughts by E.V. Lucas. The author's friend gives a third thought to the matter of parting with a share of profit to the dealer. On considering it once again, he finally reaches the conclusion that he should not give any share of his profit to the dealer. The author's friend relates him that the third thoughts given to the issue of parting with share of profit advised him inwardly not to give anything to the dealer, and he destroyed the envelope and the letter which he had written to the dealer. Then he contemplated and finished the matter, saying, such bargains are all part of the game of give and take policy, or one party wins and the other is defeated. The winner is not supposed between the buyer and the seller. The seller sells his things by taking as much money as he can receive from the buyers, and the customer pays it according to his purse capacity. As such, there exists no obligation towards the dealer. It is not the gift but a thing obtained after paying its cost. Once the value of the thing is paid, it belongs to the buyer, and if the bought thing brings profit, the buyer is not obliged to share the profit, and if the thing brings loss, the seller is not going to bear the share of the loss. Hence, the author's friend rightly abandons the idea of parting with the profit. E.V. Lucas has presented a practical codes of conduct on the matters of buying and selling. Besides, it is also observed that the more thoughts you give to a matter and debate within, the more you go away from the original thought. The note was to the effect that I had sold the drawing at a profit, which enabled me to make him a present, because it was not an old and perhaps old belief of mine that one should do this kind of thing. Good luck should be shared. These lines are an extract from the essay Third Thoughts, written by E.V. Lucas. The author bought an old painting from an antique shop and sold it for a good price. He earned a good profit from his dealing. He wanted to give a part of this profit to shopkeeper. He wrote a letter to the painting seller. The author wanted to give to the painting dealer some part of his profit, which he had earned by selling and painting. He wrote a letter for the dealer, which was to effect that he had sold the painting in a good price and he earned profit. This thing encouraged the author to gift some amount of the profit to dealer, because in the opinion of author it was an old but old belief that this kind of charitable acts should be done. Charitable acts should be done. Good luck always be shared with others. The advantage of advancing years lies in discovering that traditions are true and therefore alive. Indeed, a tradition is not even traditional except when it is alive. It is great fun to find out that the world has not repeated proverbs because they are proverbial, but because they are practical. This prose extract has been taken from G.K. Chesterton's essay on the pleasure of being very young. The author contends that a young person does not approve the idea of the old people. He feels surrounded by the old things, proverbs, and maxims. He feels that he is living in a town of toms. Chesterton says that to young people, everything that is old seems to them as dead, but it is an advantage to the person advancing in years that they find a real meaning of the old traditions, which seemed to traditions are true, and therefore They are living, not dead. It means the traditions prevailing in the world have their significance and therefore they live. In fact, a tradition is not a tradition if it does not carry any meaning. It is strange to find that the world has not adopted the proverbs repeatedly because they are old, but because they are practical. The author contends that the durability of a proverb or a tradition depends upon its utility and practicability. They are parts of life because they are useful and fit to our day to day experience. This secret is revealed to the person who advances in years. It is his advantage over the young because the latter is yet in ignorance of knowing the significance of the living traditions. Another paradox. Another paradox in this. Another paradox is this, that it is not the young people who realize the new word. The modern do not realize modernity. They have never known anything else. They have stepped on to a moving platform which they hardly know to the moving, as a man cannot feel the daily movement of the earth. The prose extract has been taken from G.K. Chesterton's essay on the pleasure of no longer being very young. The contends that with the advancement of the age of a person, he begins to realize the importance of things and various aspects of life. Chesterton advocates about the pleasures that lie in the advancing age of a person. He says that the paradox still remains that young people don't realize the new world. In fact, the modern man doesn't realize the real meaning of modernity. Young people step on a moving platform, but they do not feel its movements. It is like that of the movement of the earth that we do not feel. That is, while moving in the newness of the modern times, do not feel its movement. This gift lies with the matured man who has undergone the experience of the young, and now they can realize the livingness of the things. In the eyes of young, the old things are meaningless. But it is the advantage of the man advancing in the age that his faculty of mind develops and he can see the newness of the new time. The author counts on the advantages of the persons advancing in age. He calls the power of understanding that develops in aging man as the pleasure of knowing the word in its right perspective. It is like the indescribable transition from the inorganic to the organic, as if the stone snakes and birds of some ancient Egyptian inscription began to leap about like living things. The thing was a dead maxim. When we were alive with youth, it becomes a living maxim when we are nearer to death. Even as we are dying, the whole world is coming to life. This passage has been taken from the essay entitled On the Pleasure of Being Very Young, written by G.K. Chesterton The essay is a plea for the calm consideration of traditional wisdom. Impatient and idealist young men of modern time dismiss the knowledge that has been handed down to us from generation to generation as superstition. In these lines, Chesterton says that certain changes occur in the world which the young people are incapable to understand. It is only when we grow older that we are able to see them. We are unable to realize these changes when we are young. We begin to realize them as we grow older. This change of perspective is like something dead coming to life. In his seemingly contradictory remark, we are led to see the great truth of human psychology and understanding. In old days, we are able to see things which we fail to see in youth. This is one of the most important advantages of old age. It is sad to note that older people realize this quite late in their life. It is this calm, serene, and peaceful view of life which makes old age valuable to us. It was nothing in itself, but it was enough to produce a mental state that checked the flickering return of life. It assumed a fantastic importance in the mind of the patient who, having survived the heavy blows of fate, died of something less than a pinprick. These lines have been extracted from A.Z. Gardiner's essay on superstitions. The author says that the psychological impact on the mind of a patient may cause death for minor ailment. If some superstition grieves his mind, whereas the same person had sustained the deadly blows of fate in a battlefield. Gardiner Gardiner intends to say that if our mind falls victim to unbounded notion like that of some superstition, we may meet the worst consequences. He refers to the state of mind of a seriously wounded patient admitted to hospital. He was treated well and showed sign of complete recovery. At that time, a psychological notion of some superstition mind that he was on the bed number 13 and his being unlucky number, he was destined to die. The psychological impact was enough to extinct the lamp of his life. His mental state became an obstacle to his returning to life only because he fell victim to the wrong superstitious notion. It is pity that patient died of no reason that was even less harmful than a pinprick. Gardiner strongly contends that such unbounded superstitious misgivings prove fatal sometimes. The patient died because of that misguided mental state of otherwise the very patient had survived the deadly wound in battlefield. We do not know much more of the power that turns the handle of this idol show than our forefathers did, but at least we have escaped the grotesque shadows that enveloped them. We do not look for divine guidance in the entails of animals or the flight of crows, and the House of Commons does not adjourn at the clap of thunder. These concluding lines of A.C. Gardiner's essay on superstitions sum up the essence of the subject that with the increase of scientific knowledge, superstitions decrease considerably. It is true that modern scientific knowledge has revealed many of the superstitions, misgivings as baseless notions that continued for ages. The author contends that it was evident belief among our ancestors that the superpower that governs the universe is beyond human understanding and reach as well. It is a mystery, yet that who turns the handle of this idol show. That is, the activities the activities of the universe. But with the help of new knowledge, we have escaped at least the utter ignorance of unrevealed facts of the natural world around us. Now the modern aptitude for superstitions is changed due to scientific revealings, as a result of which we do not look for divine guidance to dawn upon our minds to guide us. We do not believe in searching solutions in the endings of animals or flight of crows, which were considered as ill omens by the ancients. Now the House of Commons does not adjourn if any prominent leader proclaims that he has heard the thunder from heaven, so assembly should be postponed in the manner that Pompey, the Roman emperor, had proclaimed in the Roman assembly in older times. That is, the modern outlook is more rational, baseless superstitions. The references in the statement are related to ancient events. It is said Cicero lost his life because when he was on his ship to sail off, crows hovered over it and he returned back to shore where he was killed by his enemy. Again, where Pompey, the Roman general, was afraid that Romans would elect Cato as praetor, he shouted to the assembly that he heard thunder and got whole election postponed, because Romans would not take any step if someone heard the thunder. Thunder is symbol of voice from heaven. But these shadowy reminiscences of antique credulity which we discover in ourselves play no part in the lives of any of us. They belong to a creed outward. Superstition was disinherited when science revealed the laws of universe and put man in his place. These lines have been taken from the essay on superstitions written by A.C. Gardiner. Gardiner refers to some of the common superstitious beliefs and points out that with the advancement of science and increase in our knowledge about nature, our beliefs now appear baseless. Gardiner is of the opinion that superstitions are the products of our ignorance. In old days, when science had not revealed the mysteries of nature, people thought mysteries, powers ruled the world. In modern days of scientific knowledge and rational attitude, there is no place for superstitions. Gardiner says that with little knowledge about nature and the universe, it was natural for man to be superstitious. Man knew nothing about the mysteries of nature. Man thought that he was nearly a plaything in the hands of forces of nature, which appeared so frightening and powerful. It was but natural that man developed many superstitious beliefs, and tried to find ways to save himself from calamities. I should have liked to have been Caesar, and I should have liked to have heard Cicero. But on the balance, I think we who inherit this later day and who can jest at the shadows that were so real to them have the better end of time. These lines are from A.Z. Gardiner's essay entitled On Superstitions. In this essay, Gardiner attempts to discuss the origin of superstitions. Gardiner says that we are fortunate that we have born in the modern age of science when we know much about nature and natural occurrences. Gardiner says that even great men like Caesar and Cicero believed in superstitions. They were superstitious people. Caesar was a great Roman emperor, but he was a superstitious man. He consulted soothsayers and fortune tellers. He took decision after reading his fate in omens. Another great man, Cicero, was a learned philosopher and an orator. Gardiner has all regard for these people and expressed his wish to have heard the origins of Cicero and to have seen Caesar. However, he thinks himself fortunate that he was born in the modern age of science when we know much more about nature and natural occurrences. Although we still know very little about God, superstitions now belong to creed outward. Superstition was disinherited when science revealed the laws of the universe and put man in his place. Even so great a man as Caesar, also so modern and enlightened a man like Cicero left their fate to omens. Cicero lost his life by trusting to the wisdom of crowds, but now we can jest and laugh at the superstitions that were so real to our forefathers, and therefore we were happier than our forefathers and live in a better age. It is a great thing to possess a true knowledge of one's own ignorance, for in a sense you must have knowledge even to know even the names of things you do right now. This prose extract has been taken from the essay In Praise of Ignorance, written by Hilaire Belloc. The author is talking about the ignorance that is praiseworthy. He says, knowledge is good, but we must also be conscious of our ignorance about so many things in the world. The knowledge which is impossible. Belloc emphasizes that to be conscious of our own ignorance is very important. It is only when we know that we are ignorant about so many things and knowledge, it is again stressed upon that knowledge is our ignorance, is the beginning of learning. So it is a valuable thing to know of our ignorance about things. We do not even know the meaning of so many terms unless we are conscious of our ignorance about things. We cannot be truly great. Belloc gives examples of many terms about which most of us do not know anything. They feel ignorance will prompt them to keep on searching the facts, and this process is going on since the knowledge dawned upon man. Nay, to conclude upon a note of grandeur, it is by ignorance alone that we advance through the rough seas of this our mortal life. The metaphor is not original. I do not claim it so. I copy it from others. Were not men ignorant of that, were not ignorant of what lay before them, no one would face adventure. These lines have been extracted from the essay In Praise of Ignorance, written by Hilaire Belloc. The author says that ignorance is inherent in every human being. Ignorance is the identity of a searching man. It is true of every human being that he makes his way through the world in ignorance most of the time. Belloc speaks in praise of ignorance because he holds ignorance to be the normal phenomena of human life. In order to arrive at conclusion about ignorance, we need to realize that we go through the troubled sea of our life in ignorance for most of the time. It is undisputed non-fact. The man is mortal and it should be accepted without grudge. Man must face the final end, which he knows inwardly, yet he passes through the odds of life quite ignorantly. The moment he begins to be conscious of this fact, his movements stop. Belloc contends that if man were not ignorant of what was lying before him, he would have shirked from facing adventure. It is again reiterated that man is mortal and he knows it, yet he possesses to be ignorant about it. It is because he has to be active and adventurous in the sea of life that is never calm and quiet. It is his spirit that makes him overlook the fact in the wake of his inner urge of adventure. It's by ignorance alone that we advance through the rough seas of his mortal life. The metaphor is not original. I do not claim it so. I copy it from others. We were not men ignorant of what lay before them. No one would face the adventure. No one would face the adventure. These lines of Hilaire Belloc's essay entitled In Praise of Ignorance. He says that in comparison to our knowledge, our ignorance is vast, but ignorance keeps us happy. We look at a beautiful landscape, it makes us happy, its charm attracts us. But if we knew the wicked people living therein, our happiness would vanish. We face great difficulties and situations bravely only because we do not know what would happen in future. Happenings makes us do great adventurous deeds. If we knew the results of our adventurous deeds, we would not face the danger. In this way, ignorance has many advantages in life. It keeps us happy. We do not know what misfortune awaits us in future. Not knowing about that, we remain happy and proud in our present happy stage. Booze snobbery has now made it socially permissible and in some circles even creditable, rather credible for well brought up women of all ages from 15 to 70 to be seen drunk, if not in public, at least in the very much tempered privacy of party. These lines have been borrowed from the essay Selected Snobberies, written by Aldous Huxley. Booze snobbery means the fashion of having hard drinks, and the author says that it has become a socially permissible fashion. It is related to American system. It was the result of American Prohibition Act, which lasted from 1910 to 1910 to 33. Even in France, an amendment was sought in regard to consumption of hard drinks. Booze snobbery is a term given by the Americans, and Huxley remarks sarcastically about this fashion of taking hard drinks, which has taken the shape of social snobbery. The high society regards convention of taking drinks at all occasions as a mark of prestige and a royal heritage. It is not limited to male sex only. Even ranging from the age of 15 to 70 take pride in having drinks. Each party, if it has been arranged by high society people, can be marked with men and women drunk. However, such drinking is not found in public places. It is limited to private parties. This trend of vain show is in vogue among so-called well-brought up men and women, and Huxley calls it a vain show of bad habits. The USA administration introduced the National Prohibition Act in 1910, which continued up to 1933. It was because it had become a social evil. However, the act was lifted, but Aldous Huxley takes an opportunity to satirize such indecent evil of society. The value of snobbery in general, its humanistic point, consists in its power to stimulate activity. A society with plenty of snobberies is like a dog with plenty of fleas. It is not likely to become comatose. Every snobbery demands of its devotees unceasing efforts, a succession of sacrifices. The society snob must be perpetually lion hunting. The modernity snob can never rest from trying to be up to date. This prose extract has been taken from Aldous Huxley's essay Selected Snobberies. The author discusses society snobbery and modernity snobbery according to humanistic merits. He has hinted at the art snobs inclined towards modernity snobs and that shaped into society snobbery. He presents the trend of hero worship and up-to-date fashion that has gripped the mind of modern men. The author says that the value of snobbery in general is a sort of power to stimulate activity in society, which he calls the humanistic point. But he contends that a society that is full of snobbery is a diseased society. It will be like a dog with plenty of fleas, just as a dog with loads of fleas on its body suffers from a filthy disease and continues to survive quite sickly. So does a society with plenty of snobberies suffer from all sorts of evils. The fleas are symbols of evils. That is, every man embarrassing snobbery is cultivating evils in him. That is, every evil demands of its devotees never ending efforts and a succession of sacrifices of his conscience in order to maintain the taste. They would undergo a series of pretended actions. Among them, the social snobs always look for heroes and heroines to adore and to follow. In that effort, they try to seem modern. It serves as an infection. Consequently, such snobbery assumes the shape of modernity snobbery. Thereby, they too seek to be most up to date in everything. Such a culture is certainly a diseased one, for it will be a vain show of varied snobberies. The diseased society is to the simile of a dog with lots of fleas. Huxley passes sarcastic remarks on such a spoiled society. He also satirizes the trend of hero worship. Religious snobbery is only one out of a great multitude of snobberies, of which now some, now others take pride of place in general esteem. For snobberies ebb and flow. Their empire rises, declines, and falls in the most appeared historical manner. What were good snobberies 100 years ago and now out of fashion? These lines are from Huxley's essay entitled Selected Snobberies. Huxley says that all men are snobs about something. There is nothing about which man cannot feel snobbish. Huxley men who think that it is romantic to die of tuberculosis like kids. Disease snobs feel snobbish, especially about disease of the rich. Huxley says that disease snobbery is only one of many snobberies which men have. He says that different snobberies become popular at different times. Certain snobberies come in fashion at one time. They are forgotten. Other snobberies take their place. It is like what happens in human history. Empires rise, decline, and fail. Decline and fall. This process continues in the same manner. Empires of snobberies rise, decline, and vanish. Fashions of snobberies continue to come and go. Snobberies which were considered good in the past lost their importance and vanish. Other snobberies take their place. This process continues forever. There is too little respect paid to the good resolutions which are so popular a feature of the new year. We laugh at the man who is always turning over a new leaf as though he were the last word in absurdity, and we even invent proverbs to discourage him, such as the road to hell is paved with good intentions. This makes life extremely difficult for the well-being, well-meaning. It robs many of us of the very last of our life, little store of virtue. Our virtue we have hitherto put almost entirely into our resolutions. These lines have been lifted from Robert Lynd's essay on good resolution. Most of the people fail to fulfill their resolutions. Some people regard that this is very unvirtuous and improper. Those who fail to fulfill their resolution deserve damnation. Robert Lynd says that such a view is wrong. Good resolution means promise of regular actions made on the New Year's Day. Most people make some promises on this day to improve their life and behavior in the new year. However, man is a weak creature. Most people are weak-willed people, so people fail to fulfill most of those resolutions they make on the New Year day. Robert Lynd sees no great harm in this. There are people who laugh at those people who make good resolutions. They laugh because they know they will not be fulfilled. They think that making good resolutions is absurd because they are not fulfilled. Lynd does not approve of this attitude. It is wrong to suppose that those who fail to fulfill their resolutions become damned people. This makes people sad. Robert Lynd does not think that they are damned. He says that not fulfilling good resolutions does not mean we have become unvirtuous. There is no harm in making good resolutions. Most men fail to act accordingly only because it is against human nature. We make a good resolutions with a pious heart. We are not so good as to put them into actions. It is one thing to make good resolutions, it is another to act. The road dash intentions means most people are not able to fulfill their resolutions and lapse into their old ways on account of which they merit damnation. However, Lynd does not agree with this view. Here Lynd is ridiculing human tendency of making good resolutions and breaking them regularly. Lynd is hinting at the follies and foibles of human beings. Every day lies before us H. Wonderful. As London lay before Blucher on the night when every day lies before us as wonderful as London lay before Blucher on the night when he exclaimed, "My God, what a city to loot! Our life is gorgeous with tomorrows. It is all tomorrows." Good resolutions might be described in the words in which a cabinet minister once described journalism as the intelligent anticipation of events. They are, however, the intelligent anticipation of events which do not take place. They are the April of virtue with no September following. This passage has been taken from Robert Lyne's essay on good resolution. Robert Lyne says that good resolutions point toward a bright future. Resolutions are our high ideals. They are like daydreams. They are not necessarily dreams of a fortune which is to be realized. One is free to dream anything. The dreamer does not bother about his dreams being possible or impossible. Same is the case with our resolutions. They are pleasant because they are not concerned with the present moment but with future that is to come. They make our tomorrows very romantic and colorful. Future looks wonderful with so many sweet, charming dreams. Lynd argues that our lives are nothing but a long chain of dreams of brilliant future. The German General Blücher, who helped the Duke of Wellington to defeat Napoleon at Waterloo in 1815, had said that London presented a remarkably beautiful sight. His words were, "My gods, what a city to loot." Once a minister described journalism as an intelligent anticipation of events. Lynd says that good resolutions are also only anticipations of events. He adds that good resolutions anticipate those events which often never take place. Lynd calls good resolutions as April of virtue. April is the month of fresh flowers and green leaves. Thus, good resolutions are fresh and beautiful. September symbolizes autumn. Good resolutions never have their autumn because they are rarely fulfilled. They are like trees which never fructify. Good resolutions remain daydreams. As daydreams, they are always inspiring and pleasant. What a bundle of contradictions is a man. Surely, humor is the saving grace of us. For without it, we should die of vexation. With me, nothing illustrates the contrariness of things better than the matter of sleep. These lines are from the essay entitled On Getting Off to Sleep, written by J.B. Priestley. The essay is inspired by Priestley's deeply sympathetic interest in the common experiences of life. There are the opening lines of the essay. He is surprised to think of the contradictions found in man. This is a disturbing fact of life, but humor saves us from this troubling factor of life. Priestley says that, in his own case, the most important contradiction is the matter of sleep. He finds that we cannot sleep easily when he wants to sleep. He remains awoke in bed for hours. When he sits down to write something, he feels sleepy. He cannot do his writing work because he feels sleepy at that time. Thus, in his case, the most contrary thing is about sleep. In fact, this is a common experience with many of us. I imagined the picture on the wall without difficulty. The grave it a few deft touches, but this set me thinking of pictures in general, and then I remembered an art exhibition I had attended with my friend T, and what he said and what I said. I wondered how T was faring these days and whether his son was still at school, and so it went on until I found myself meditating on cheese or spiritualism or the Rocky Mountains, but no sleep. These lines are from the essay entitled On Getting Off to Sleep, written by J.B. Priestley. In this essay, Priestley talks about his inability to fall asleep soon after laying down on his bed. He tosses in bed for an hour or two before getting off to sleep. During this period of sleeplessness, his mind wanders from earth to heaven and from heaven to earth. The author tried several means to induce sleep, but in vain. One of his friends suggested to him a way of inducing sleep. She suggested that he should imagine himself performing some trivial action over and over again. Soon his mind would become bored and he would fall asleep. Priestley tried to this method. He imagined himself straightening a picture hanging on the wall, but he soon started thinking of picture in general. Then he thought of an art exhibition he had attended with a friend. Then he started thinking of his friend and his son and his school and so on. He went on thinking of many other things like cheese or spiritualism or mountains. In spite of his best efforts, he failed to get sleep. Still keeping hold of the fair price, they grappled fiercely at one another's throats. As they struggled to and fro, the table was overturned. These lines refer to Nathaniel Hawthorne's story Dr. Heidegger's experiment. In this story, the writer tries to bring home to the minds of the readers that human nature is essentially incorrigible. Three old gentlemen and a old lady virtually are rejuvenated by swallowing the wondrous water of the fountain of youth. They become young and soon start behaving irresponsibly like wanton young people. In these lines, the writer tells us the effect which the swallowing of the wondrous weather of the fountain of youth had brought upon the four old people. The three old gentlemen who had become young out of effect of the water of youth began to quarrel to possess widow Shirley. They madly began to understand widow Shirley as a beautiful gift for themselves. They were ready to cut down one another's neck to get widow Shirley. When they were quarreling to and fro to possess her, they struck the table and overturned it on to which the jug full of water of young was keeping. There was a healthful suffusion on their cheeks instead of ashen hue that had made them look so corpse-like. They gazed at one another and fancied that some magic power had really begun to smooth away the deep and sad inscriptions which Father Time had been so long engraving on their brows. These lines refer to Nathaniel Hawthorne's story, Dr. Heidegger. Nathaniel Hawthorne was a very famous literary giant in American literature. He was a great school days friend of Franklin Pierce, who later became the president of the USA. In this story, the writer tries to bring home to the minds of the readers that human nature is essentially in three old gentlemen. Three old gentlemen and a widow old lady virtually are rejuvenated by swallowing the wondrous water of the fountain of youth. They become young and soon start behaving irresponsibly like wanton young people. In these lines, the writer tells us the effect which the swallowing of the wondrous water of the fountain of the youth had brought upon the four old people. The cheeks of the old person became rosy, and there was no sign of old, wrinkled and dying face. Formerly, they were looking fixed at one another. They felt the magic power of that wondrous water which had taken away all their old age signs which Father Time had made on their faces. Father Time, here time has been personified, as time is a great destroyer and it withers all things, none can escape its claws. But the doctor's four friends had taught no such lesson to themselves. They resolved forthwith to make pilgrimage to Florida and quaff at morning, noon, and night from the fountain of youth. These lines have been taken from the story Dr. Heidegger's experiment written by Nathaniel Hawthorne. In the story, the writer tries to bring home to the mind of the readers that human nature is essentially bad. It is beyond correction of reform, beyond correction and reform. Three old gentlemen and a widow old lady drank the water of the fountain of youth and became energetic, but they soon started behaving irresponsibly like wanton people. The use of strange liquid had steamed off the sensitiveness in the sense of the people, and it had made them feel young and enthusiastic. But soon it fizzled out, and the four persons felt as old as they were before. The story exposes that human nature is full of weaknesses, and many of them are incorrigible. Every old person wants to show himself as young. When the effect of water of fountain of youth comes to finish, and those gentlemen become old persons again, even though they don't learn any lesson from the incident. They don't realize the eternal truth that nothing is permanent in this world and death is the interim reality after the old age. On getting the young age for some time, they forgot all the manners, ethics, and moralities and began to behave wantonly. They had no sense of shame for their shameful acts and behavior when they become old again. They strongly decide that they would go to the pilgrimage to Florida, where the fountain of youth is situated. There they would drink the water of youth in the morning, in the afternoon, and at night, and thus they would remain young forever. Thus, the writer tells us about the desire of human soul to be young. Scholars and learners of the English literature, those who are listening, really it is nice time, nice place, praiseworthy moment, listening with 100% present sense of mind. You listen it carefully. The students, those who are going to appear in an examination, they will get more confident and they will face number of questions out of these explanations. Really it will encourage them, motivate them to do something better, nicer, finer in the English literature. Thanks, listeners and learners. I again welcome the most honorable President Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi ji, respected doctors and ministers, affectionate sons and daughters, those who are listening. I heartily, cordially welcome all of you again. I thank you for your presence. Thanks to see, thanks, nice to listen, read, write, speak the truth of literature. Thanks, nice brothers.